I recently had the chance to interview author Abby Goldsmith on what she was planning to do for her upcoming book release. Stay tuned for not only the book release and how she was planning to market it, but I have since followed up with her and found out how the promotion actually went, what worked, and what didn't work. Now, fair warning, I am a business coach transitioning into the space of publication, so I'm still learning a lot. And a lot of this conversation was me bouncing ideas off of Abby and thinking, would this work? Could you try this? And I'm getting a lot of them shut down. It's been a learning experience. However, I think there's one principle with the follow-up and with other authors I've talked to that is starting to be a very, very consistent pattern. And some other insights and tests that I have that I might like to run based on what she said the outcomes were. So I think we've learned a lot, although I get shot down quite a bit in this interview where I ask, have you tried this? Or what about that? So this is the learning process as I learn to adopt the large field of, potential marketing strategies to specifically what works in the indie self-publishing space. Hey, quick interruption. So my mission is to fix the internet for sci-fi and fantasy creators and fan bases. I think there are reasons why it is so hard to build a following and support yourself. Mainly that most most aren't built for building communities and fan bases. They're built so large websites can advertise to your audience. And so that's just hugely broken and insane. It should not be as hard as it is to create a following and support yourself on creative work. Doesn't mean everyone's going to get there, but I would like more people to be able to support themselves with their creative work. That's my mission. This channel is just the beginning of that. I want to build better websites and tools. If you like and subscribe, you can help me build the channel and more quickly get to a place where I can build you tools that will make this whole business of writing thing easier. So please, like and subscribe, share. That's great. That too, yes, please. Or tell me, if this video is not good enough to earn your like and subscribe, tell me below in the comments what I could give you that would be more valuable. Thanks. Hi, I'm with Abby Goldsmith. And do you have a pen name?
Just Abby Goldsmith. That's what it is.
All right, great. So writing under Abby Goldsmith, and she has a book launch in a month. What's your book about?
Oh, okay. So it's the first in a 6-book epic sci-fi fantasy space opera kind of series. And the basic premise is there's a galactic empire. Everyone who rules the empire is neurally networked together. So the majority rules. It's basically mob rule. Everyone votes on everything. Everyone judges each other. There's no secrets, no crime, no privacy. And the main character, the majority votes to enslave his foster family and friends. So yeah, so he's got to figure out a way to either escape while everyone's watching him, or, somehow persuade the majority that they're wrong. So,
nice. Right,
and the majority is 38.2 trillion individuals. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's echoes of was it Deconstructed Man or there are old school sci-fi novels specifically about this is someone trying to get away with a crime, but rather than being a hero, but trying to get a crime in a society where there are telepaths who can read your mind.
Yes, but the society itself is pretty awful. I mean, obviously it needs to be replaced.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. How do you maintain a sense of self when you're networked to trillions of people?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big problems. He has a mentor who ends up being one of the main antagonists who is very good at navigating the majority. She's got a huge audience. She's great at crowd pleasing. She's like a pro at it. But yeah, she secretly has ambitions and things she wants that are against what the majority wants. And she has learned how to hide that, how to be very deceptive to the majority. And, he starts to learn from her.
And That's a great plot line. I am getting excited just listening to it. Like, oh, the mentor turned antagonist. Like, I don't. I'm sure. Like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head when I've seen that, but that's not really common. Like, you have lots of like Rocky style mentors or whatnot. Kind old curmudgeon-y people that step in and help you, but ending up competing against your mentor. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who's gonna like this book? Who do you feel would just immediately like, this is my jam?
Honestly, people that like really sprawling, like big idea, thoughtful sci-fi fantasy series for the most part. I mean, I might say standalone books too. Werner Vinge is one of my inspirations. And he wrote like A Fire Upon the Deep, A Deepness in the Sky, and things like that. He's a great sci-fi author, and he has written standalones.
Nice.
Big ones. And then also like The Wheel of Time, one of my favorite series. George R. R. Martin's series, A Song of Ice and Fire, like those sorts of series where like you really dig into like the power dynamics between individuals. My series has a lot of that. It's a large cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you read Red Rising?
Yes.
That kind of similar too?
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, Red Rising for me was a little too Hunger Games and a little too Roman Empire in space. Which
sure.
fair enough that sells. But I mean, but yes, I think it would appeal to readers of Red Rising as well. Yeah.
Cool. And a favorite moment, no spoilers, but if you can share a favorite moment of yours from the book.
I mean, it's hard to do that without spoilers, honestly, because there's a lot of twists and turns. But yeah, I mean, I'd say one of my favorites is like the main character, Thomas, when he enters the megacosm, which is how all the telepaths are networked together. It's basically a realm of pure imagination, and it's not what he was expecting. I mean, he was expecting, it's like the internet. He was expecting basically the internet, and what this really is it's very much like you can live vicariously through anybody. You can go ahead and live somebody else's life, live on a different planet. You have utter freedom in the megacosm. You can do anything.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. All right. And the title of your book is in the background there. It's a little brightly lit.
That's the title of the series.
The series.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah, I made this poster before the first book came out. But the first book is Majority, Majority. So just,
all right.
Yeah.
Majority by Abby Goldsmith. So check it out. And we're going to get into the fun nitty gritty of how do you go ahead and promote a book launch as an indie writer? And just starting out with, like, what social media do you currently use?
Everything except TikTok and Instagram. I mean,
that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. Honestly, it's too much. So yeah, like I've been getting more active on Reddit and Twitter lately, and I used to be a lot more active on Facebook. I'm kind of moving away from that. Discord, I'm pretty active on. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a Discord group, Reddit, Twitter are some of the main ones. You have a online serial place that you do serials. Are any of those serials related to this universe, or is this is the book from some of those serials?
Oh yeah. This is the serial. Yeah.
This is the serial. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried it on Wattpad first, and then I went to Royal Road. And those are honestly two of the biggest sites out there.
Yeah. So we've got those going. And do you have a newsletter? Like an email list?
I do, but I have yet to send one. I think the last one I sent was in 2019.
All right. So there is, at least, from talking to you, other people, there was this great Austin convention, Armadillo Con, that we both just went to. That's where we met. Talking to people there who are promoting. I think there are real three main roles for building a fan base and selling in social media. So one is the attract new fans. Another is engaging your fans. And a last one is selling to your fans. And you can do all of these on a single network. So, if you wanted to do just, Reddit, you could create some kind of loop where you interacted with groups online and maybe formed your own group for your particular universe and then posted updates to where people could buy your book and they could talk to each other in your group, right? You could do it all in one, and that would streamline things. But there's a few pieces where like everyone pretty much agrees actually you should use this for this role. And the biggest one is newsletter. Like you should sell from your newsletter. It doesn't mean you can't post in other social networks as long as you're not, spamming a group that has rules against that. But definitely you would want to drive people to your newsletter and sell from there just because you don't own your following in any other social network. So I mean, that would be like the number one thing is like start getting really good at selling from your newsletter as well. And that doesn't mean every issue, but trying to come up with a content plan for, and you don't have to, a lot of people do like every week as a cadence, at least once a month, I think is a cadence for a newsletter, but that is something you're going to want to build over time. And for the engaging, you said you had a Discord. Like that really is the purpose of that social network is primarily for engaging fans. How's that going for you? Are there a lot of active discussions?
There were for a little while, I think, because I haven't really been able to keep up with it. It's died down, but I do see like new fans pop in there every once in a while and ask me about like, hey, could I have a free copy or or I'll pay for the advanced copies. Where are they? Yeah. So I like having it. I mean, it's definitely worthwhile to maintain that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if that's something worthwhile to maintain, and we can talk about this kind of in tips and tricks for streamlining how to do this while you have a day job without losing your sanity while still writing. All of that, it's a lot. We could talk a little bit about how to manage that. But if that has worked well for you, I would keep that. And so the idea is that you would find a social network to attract new fans from, invite them to your Discord to engage them, and in your Discord and other places, you can make this all interconnected, but in your Discord, you'd kind of push the newsletter for advanced chapter or something like free intro chapter or like bonus material, that kind of thing.
Well, is a great way. Patreon's for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's Patreon. You got Patreon too, right?
Yes. It's a lot. Yeah.
So, but you can bring people into that, like typically how people plug their newsletters. And this is again, the problem with Patreon is again, you don't technically own your following and they kind of control it. So that's why you do want to sell from your newsletters. But getting people to sign up for your newsletters, you usually want to offer them something, a freebie of some kind, short story, like a original, not published anywhere else short story is a great thing for that. I've heard of people doing backstories of characters or whatever that isn't covered in the novel, but that people might be curious about. That sort of thing. When you get multiple books, sometimes just the free first book in the series, with the idea that like once you get people hooked, they'll buy more. That type of thing is great for getting people onto newsletters. And once they're on a newsletter, then you can sell every subsequent book via that. There's no social media guardians to prevent you from selling to that channel. You're not going to lose them, etc. So that's the engage part, which you kind of have in place. And the question is really, where do you want to focus for attracting new fans?
I mean, for me, Royal Road has been great, and I plan to continue. When I write new books, new series, it'll be there first.
Okay, yeah. So for that one, you're posting regularly as you're doing your serial, right?
Yes.
Does that have a lot of tools for like discussion groups or like announcement or news, or is that pretty much just serial, like the fiction that you're uploading?
Yeah, I mean, there's author notes that you can add to
Hmm.
before and after each chapter, and there's like fans can comment. Readers can
Hmm.
comment on every chapter,
Okay.
and they do. And they can quote parts of it. They can like edit your typos, which,
Yeah.
I value.
Well, and so the thing, and this is a great long term attraction mechanism, right? Where people can find your work by your writing. If you're specifically promoting a book without having to write a new chapter, like that's a different mechanism, and it doesn't sound like there's a
Oh, there
short
is
of like,
actually.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens there? It's you really one of these things where you have to know the platform, but like
Hmm.
you a lot of authors cross promote. So like if we have
Hmm.
a similar fan base, I'll say, would you shout out my new book is coming to Amazon? Shout it out in your new chapter, I'll shout out yours.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean there's no rule against doing that. And the readers there are very much used to that because every author there does it.
Okay, great. And that's in the author's notes.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. So this is almost like an SEO strategy, i.e., you write stuff that people will be searching for, you find them or they find you via that search, and then on your website, like once they're there and they found you via the search, that you can plug your announcement in the serial, and you
Or
can
if
have
you
other authors do that as well.
right, exactly. Like if there's an author there that has 10,000 fans, I
Mhm.
would definitely want them to mention my forthcoming book. And some of them
Awesome.
will, yeah. So
Um, yeah, I think that's a great promotion mechanism. I think this is a judgment call, and like the social media opportunity that's not there, that sounds like on that platform, is really the ability to go into new groups and discussions. Like you can have other people promote your work on their writing, but like just you personally go into new groups and discussions and be able to offer some value of content, not in a spammy way, but like be able to promote your work, right? So you still might be interested in a Reddit where you could be a part of groups who are interested in similar things, and then put like a link to your book in your profile, right? Or a link to your Discord, etc. And like kind of attract new people in that way, and or Twitter, where you can kind of find conversations going on and jump in, and again in your profile um, link to your social network. And the advantage of those things is they allow you to intentionally ramp up excitement for a book, like leading up to a book. You can get like you probably um, from just posting on your own network, maybe with some cross promotion, you get a bump, but like you're not going to get a huge bump in people finding your serial directly, right?
I don't know. I mean, it depends. Like so there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of Reddits and
Yep.
Twitter communities and Discords that are all peripheral around Royal Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in a lot of those as well. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, so those are definitely readers talking about books, but
Mm-hmm.
like most communities, they don't really allow, they're very restrictive with self-promotion, which you don't
Yep.
blame them. Yeah. So it's
All right. Yeah, I don't blame them at all. And actually, that's something, yeah, I want to dive into. I'm just like right now, we'll think about like the macro framework. So there's a lot of these communities for the sake of time. I would probably focus on one, whether it's like the Reddit or Twitter or whatever that's associated with Royal Road. You're already in these communities. I assume you've already been posting.
yeah.
Okay, good. So it's not like you're joining, especially like you could join these group with the intent to promote and do it very carefully, where you're contributing to the group and very careful about how and when you promote, in such a way that you're not spammy. But like I would say, it's already a very good sign that you've already joined these communities. You're already contributing them. It's much easier to promote without being feeling sleazy or spammy, if you've already been giving to the community, which you've been doing. So which of those communities do you feel like are the most active? Like
The
Reddit, Twitter,
Discords.
the Discords? Okay.
Yeah, definitely the Discords.
Okay, the Discords. So, all right. So Discord's interesting because it's not very searchable, so people can't find it. But if a big group already exists, that you could do the same thing you could do in a Discord group, in a Facebook group, in a Reddit group, not so much on Twitter, which is like a completely different structure, but like, they're the same different model. So it sounds like, all right, you have people finding you organically. You have a plan to cross promotion with other writers. And I assume, kind of along the lines of not being spammy, I assume you've cross promoted other authors as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. Again, yeah, that's part of not being spammy, is like, you want to make sure you're giving to the community, not just taking.
Yeah.
So you're in a position to do the cross promotion. You're in a position to potentially promote in other Discords, and we'll talk about just different strategies of how to do that without being spammy. Right. And so those are kind of acquisition models where you're getting new fans from people finding you, from the cross promotion, from the Discord groups. You're funneling them either directly to your newsletter, or there's kind of three invites probably that you're having. There's inviting them to Discord, just engage and talk about it. There's inviting them to newsletter, hopefully with a freebie. Is a great way, like the classic way to sell, right? That you'd want to be able to have, and then you can invite them to buy. And like alternatively, you could just have a website that has all three of these things, like on a very simple landing page that says, buy our book on Amazon, join the newsletter for this freebie, join our Discord to talk about it. Like that's a way that you could have like one invitation, like come to, check out, you can find my book and the, newsletters and freebies at this website. And then it's like a single invitation wherever you put it, whether it's like in your newsletter, cross promotion Discord. You could do that. Or you could just promote the book directly, like go to Amazon. And this is something nonfiction people do this a lot. I feel like it's like fiction people are starting to get into it, but have some kind of tie-in in your book for people to sign up to your newsletter. And that way you can bring the people who find you directly on Amazon back into, your community, your engaged fan base, so they're connected when you come out with the next book. So is that last piece something you've thought about in terms of how to get people, actually readers of your book, into your Discord or newsletter?
Yeah, I do have a call to action to join my Discord at the end of the back matter. I probably should do it for my newsletter as well. That newsletter, man, it's fallen by the wayside. I need to work on that.
It's a big piece. I would use it. And it's really cross promoting, right? Like in your newsletter, you're going to mention your Discord and the book on Amazon, or, wherever in your Discord, you're going to promote the book and the newsletter. Do offer a freebie for the newsletter. And then, yeah, in the book, you want a way for them to dive back into it, and a specific reason. Like that's, again, why the newsletter with the freebie is pretty powerful. And that's really what I see with the nonfiction. So nonfiction, they'll have a free course that goes along with that, like where you can download the PDFs or whatever to print out for worksheets that you might use for like the nonfiction book, right? And I've kind of mentioned the fiction equivalent often tends to be free chapters, free advanced chapters, or like short stories that aren't published, aren't published on Amazon or Royal Road or something like that.
I definitely have a few, and I'm ready with them. Yep.
Great. So yeah. So if you already have that ammo in the corner, that'd be a great place to go. So does that whole framework kind of make sense? How you're going to attract people, where you're going to invite them, how to kind of keep them in the community?
Yeah. Yeah.
At some point, there's a lot going on there. At some point, that probably needs to be a diagram. So maybe I'll have a newsletter in it with that diagram. So, all right. Diving into attracting without being sleazy. Like, I think most people who are not psychopaths are worried about coming across as like, I don't want to be spammy when I'm promoting my work. Is that like fair, that you kind of feel that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And so I think my number one principle of like, there's tactics and whatnot, but like the number one principle is that when you're promoting yourself is that geek out about something that inspires your work or related to your work. And then just let people know when they ask about you that you have your work. Is like it's hard to go wrong with that. And it's the same thing I was kind of doing at Armadillo Con, right? Is I'm, talking with authors about what they're doing. And I'm excited about what they're doing. I'm excited to be there and talk about science fiction and fantasy. I'm geeking out with them. And then just letting them know, hey, I'm organizing some groups for sci-fi and fantasy authors and artists for learning how to promote their work. And I don't feel like I came across spammy. Could you sanity check me on that? Did I feel spammy?
No. Yeah,
okay.
that was fine.
Right. And so like that was one of the things where it's like, all right, I think that principle is what I try and do is like, I try and genuinely, one, listen to the other person, engage them. I'm not just talking, but two, like geeking out about the same thing. Like,
like one thing I noticed is, a lot of, some newer or younger authors, they haven't read that much, or they're not as well read. And so they're not able to really do that as well. And I've been around, I read a lot. So like, so I'm usually able to be like, oh, I've read that. Yep, I've read that too. Yep, definitely read that one.
Right. and you're already in, a lot of these communities with similar work and et cetera, so that you can be excited about the same things. So yeah, the baseline promotion isn't even telling people directly you have a book. It's like geeking out with content that like making posts that people like enough to look at your bio, and then your bio has the link to something else. So like that's a baseline promotion. It's always good anywhere. And there's different strategies for that, like initial post to really grab attention. Like if you really want to be strategic about it, right? You can kind of think of like, there are different genres of posts that tend to grab attention. Stories. So a story about writing where you can mention writing your book, but like, a personal story that's interesting, that's compelling. And so some of that is like, could be Armadillo Con stuff where if this is a group that has a lot of writers in it, where you like got extra like excellent advice from like some published author on the book that you're releasing, right? That would be an example of like, if there's a bunch of authors or people who are interested in those authors, then again, you're not linking to the book anywhere. You're just saying, hey, I went to this con, super excited, heard this awesome talk by so-and-so who helped me with this piece of releasing my book. Like that kind of thing. Like it's like a personal story. And if there are a lot of people curious about, like, if this is a lot of writers in it curious about promotion, that's a pretty natural thing to share without being spammy. Because again, you're not linking. And if they're curious, they can ask you or see your bio. That would be
that's fair enough. Example. I mean, I feel like I'm always doing that anyway. I mean, all my life, honestly, I want to pull back a bit from social media. I'm very tired of it lately. But
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, and we can talk about streamlining it in a sec. Diving into attract other people, other types of posts. Like the hot take, like strong disagreement. If you have something will be like I mean, not a hot take in the sense of like you're insulting anybody or anything like that, but just like you have a minority viewpoint of something like about like, hey, I always see this in science fiction. I know a lot of people love it and that's fine, but I'm interested in this thing that I never see happening. Like that kind of, strategic post.
And by the way, it happens at mine. And then people will be like, she's self-promoting, of course.
Well, no, just again, like I said, right. The baseline is you don't even link to your thing. I mean, you can play with putting that in, and I think there's probably better ways and less good ways. For instance, a better way is don't say it at all in the post, and if it's relevant in the comments, bring it up in the comments. Don't link. Again, people can check out your bio or whatever for things like that, right? And so it's like lead with the geekiness, right? There's always the fear of like, I don't want to promote, then like, all right, just geek out. And you can never go wrong with that. And then people will find you, find your bio, find your link. So you don't have to worry about that. Again, like don't push your book, but do find the things you're excited about, right? Like, I mean, for me, this is maybe a weird thing to geek out about, but just the like mentor turned rival. I really liked that. Like I liked all of the how to, save your family from, majority, like the tyranny of the majority in a telepathic society is a great premise too. But like there's something about that, like I don't see that a lot. And so you could, for instance, if you do like for instance, not directly promoting your own work, right? If you find an example of that you like somewhere else, you could share that.
Yeah, I've had trouble finding that elsewhere. That's why one of the reasons I wrote it. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
but like, yeah, just I guess for the sake of example, you could post somebody else doing it well or doing it badly or whatever and comment on that. Again, nothing in the post about your thing. And then if it's natural in the conversation, you can talk to like, yeah, this is why I am trying to do that in my book. And I think one of the things, like if you don't actually mention your book anywhere in the original post, for most people, that will like, I think that's fine for most conversations. I've run into a few like super zealous gatekeepers who, this is more in like the entrepreneur space where I said like, they have forums for where you can ask people to like review your work or whatever. And it's actually not that different from having like, for a writer, having people do blurbs or whatnot. And in one of those like, so I asked someone to review my work, like my website, like, is this interesting to you? Here's like a demo thing. And then they liked it a lot and they said, I need this in my life. And I'm like, oh, well, I have like an extended demo version for free if you want to sign up in the comments. And one time where I did that, I did have, a super zealous moderator being like, that's not okay. And I'm like, I'm not even selling anything. I'm still asking for feedback, just asking for feedback on a larger thing because the person was interested. And like, I didn't get banned or anything, but like, I did feel that like that reaction from being slapped on the wrist. And like, I have that very negative reaction, you have a really negative reaction. I don't want someone to yell at me for being spammy again. But to be honest, whenever I've talked to, shared that story with other people or have done that again, I think most people realize like, actually, yeah, that if someone's super interested in what you're doing and asks for more, then like, I think actually, if you want to be super safe, I guess, and not be spammy and avoid moderators, and just say like, oh, great, I have more, DM me. Something like that is another way to avoid being spammy.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And also I'll say like some communities, they allow self-promotion on Fridays or something. Like some of them do. Yeah.
And so like be active in that community and then, do the self-promotion on Friday thing. That's another great example that I was getting to. And I think the third strategy for acquisition is where you go directly to the moderator with content you think will help the group, but that also might promote your work. So this is not internet, but like it's the perfect metaphor for how you should do this. Because I think when we think about people promoting their work on the internet, like it's just our first association is spam because we've seen so much of it. There's so much marketing. And so I think this in-person example of actually like bookstores kind of helps you get into the headspace and see how it works. And then how you might apply it to online groups without being spammy, I think gets a little clearer. This comes from Rick Claw of Tachyon Publishing, who is talking about how various authors promote their work at ArmadilloCon. And he mentioned that there was one author who is super good at outreach to indie bookstores. So whenever she was going to a new major metropolitan area, what she would do is she would research all the indie bookstores and their clientele, what kind of stuff they're buying. Or like what kind of stuff they're stocking, who they're selling to, et cetera. Probably getting the about sections of the booksellers and, if they have some kind of mission. And then she would go to that indie bookstore, knowing what type of content serves their audience, to put it in a general content. So, what kinds of books their clientele get excited about. She would go, and then she would directly to the bookseller, like, not like surreptitiously putting up signs, posting like buy my book, right? But go directly to the moderator, i.e. the bookseller, with her book and say, hey, this is the type of content I think your audience would be really interested in. Now, in this case, there's a very clear thing you can offer a bookseller, a reading night. So you could go to that bookseller and say, hey, I'd be happy to read a chapter. This is why I think your audience will be really into it. What does the bookseller get out of that? They get a bunch of people coming into their bookstore for the reading. They promote it, put a sign up, whatever. So they're getting benefit from this content, i.e. reading, that the book promoter or an author is setting up. And then also that person gets, to sell some books. Maybe the book seller agrees to stock some of them, etc. So
yeah, I haven't quite started to wade into the world of the brick and mortar bookstores yet.
Yeah.
But I do notice that a lot of them, you do need like 4 months in advance.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are, and how do you even talk to the people that are in charge of making the decisions? They are
Yep.
hard to get a hold of. They're
Yep.
not, they don't just have like a website. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's not as easy as it sounds.
Right. It's not. And I'm not suggesting that you do. I'm suggesting this is the perfect metaphor for how you treat online groups. And so you've got something to promote. Well, one, know the group. Should be really easy since you're already a member of a lot of groups and you know what kind of content they like. But as a refresher, go back and look through popular posts and see if there's anything you can offer along that lines of content. Writing articles, doing a Q&A, a live Q&A, etc. And so when you go to the moderator of the group, you can say, I see this content has been really popular in your group. I'm promoting a book. I'd like to do this for you. Would it be okay if I did this and plug my book at the end or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
And how you're actually offering something, and really all you're asking for is kind of like a tagline at the end of the article or end of the Q&A, plug my book.
Yeah, totally. I think I'll probably be doing more of that in the future for sure.
So,
yeah.
All right. So book promotion is a lot of work. You got a day job. Social media is a lot of work. You've got a day job, and you're writing and everything. So, let's maybe take a look at how we can streamline things and make your life a little bit easier. So, what is taking up most of your time in social media?
I mean, honestly, just in all of it, like just engaging, like just like seeing what is popular, seeing like the conversations I want to be a part of. There's a lot of scrolling, finding the good conversations. I was skipping over all the, whatever. There's a lot of like kind of meaningless or just repeat questions that get asked a lot that are not that interesting. That people just kind of, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Stuff that gets downvoted.
Yes. All right. How do you what is the hallmark of a good conversation? What are you looking for?
Yeah, something like a little more thoughtful, a little more like honestly. So my readers are adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
So I do kind of get a little impatient and bored with conversations that are talking about George R. R. Martin's books or something that's just very mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, that stuff has been discovered since 1996. It's somebody that's all they've ever read is probably not a very adventurous reader. They're not looking for really new content.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not one of those either. I like to read a lot. So I don't really fit very well in the ones that are just talking about like yesteryear.
Yeah. So, all right. One of the things that's going to help you speed up this process is knowing exactly what kind of conversations you're looking for. And for example, I mean, I recommend you, as you're scrolling and finding conversations that are really productive for you, or helpful, or people who seem really interested in the kind of stuff that you're doing, write down kind of the words you're hearing. And in this case, for adventurous readers, it might be, indie titles or authors that are popular enough that like people will like, it's not just one or two people that know them, but like indie enough that they're a good signal. This person's willing to take a chance on someone who's not had an HBO show.
Right. Yeah.
And so like, so just, and I write that down, like write search terms. And you will find little weird snippets that help you. This is not specifically from books, but this is from my reaching out to authors and artists in Austin. There's a lot of people online, but can be hard to find for creating a local group, like specifically people who are in Austin. And if you ask ChatGPT for artists in Austin, it makes up stuff. So like I tried that, didn't work. Plus all its information is 2 years old anyway, so people might have moved around. So
I can introduce you to a lot of writers and artists in Austin.
Well, yeah, going to the convention, right? So like the people I met there, and even the people I didn't have time to meet, but like in the bios of the people who are there at local conventions, it was awesome. And yes, please do introduce me to people. I would love to help more people promote their stuff for free, as I'm doing right now. I am not selling anything at the moment. I have nothing to sell. But this is just kind of like one of those random examples. What I learned from doing this search intentionally and writing down like what are commonalities, where am I finding people? I found that searching for, in quotes, Austin, Texas is a great way, particularly in bios. So I could do Patreon if I'm looking for like indie artists and authors. I go to Patreon, for example, and like in Google, you can put in patreon.com. So it's searching Patreon space, in quotes, Austin, Texas. And because when people are visiting Austin, they don't tend to say like, I'm visiting Austin, Texas. Most people just assume like Austin, or right. Like people usually only put Austin, Texas as like a habit from like their address in bios and things like that. And so like, it's those types of phrases, like search intentionally for the conversations you're looking for and find out what those specific phrases are. And then being able to search for that, it might be a little bit trickier in Discord, but Discord has search, right?
Yeah, you're right. It is a little trickier in Discord. I'm not even sure how to do that.
And just like content isn't evergreen in Discord.
Yeah.
So that's the downside of using Discord or whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, I guess if you really wanted to grok Discord, you'd have like some bot that gave you an alert every time certain words were mentioned in one of your groups. I don't even know if that's doable, but like, you know, you could get an alert like, oh, so-and-so's talking about this, but then you'd have to jump on real time. But I
do have those set up for Slack.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I am kind of a fan of Slack over Discord.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned.
Yeah.
So, but that concept, right, of like knowing exactly what you're searching for, and writing it down will help you so that you're doing less scrolling and more like finding stuff that's relevant. A little trickier in Discord. If you were to, you know, like try, if Discord is where you are and it's successful for you, then go ahead with that. I would say like if it's extremely time consuming and you can't find the conversations you need, it might be worth, I mean, that's like one of the joys of Reddit, for example, is you can comment on a post and the people who were there and commented a while ago may notice, right? Get that alert. And so it doesn't have to be asynchronous and you can like search for older stuff. So like, if this doesn't work at all for you and is very time consuming in Discord, that might be a signal for like, okay, I should switch, like, you know, don't have to ditch your Discord group, but like switch my focus to Reddit and find ways to like, you know, dial down my Discord involvement because it's not really working for me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that makes sense.
So know what you're looking for. And then the other simple piece of that is like time box. Like I have half an hour to do X, because all of these things are designed to keep you scrolling forever, right? So,
right. Yeah,
so if you know exactly what you're looking for and you only have half an hour, whatever, that can help you reduce the time that you're looking for the right conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Any other like pain points with social media and promoting your work?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people run into this, but all the every forum and every little thing has its own little rules. And
Yep.
if you're in like 10 million different ones, it's pretty much impossible to remember the rules for each one. So anyway, that's a little bit of a pain point sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. This is like 80-20 rule, I think, is like what you're looking for there, which is like, what are the groups where when you talk about what you do, people are excited rather than like doing the cross and like inching away, right? As long as, again, you're not doing it in a sleazy way or whatnot. But I did some business coaching, which I recognize there's like a lot of sleazy business coaches. So like, I get it. I've wrestled with the same issue, and it's probably the same thing in book circles with like promoting your book, right? Like people have seen it done wrong so many times; they're hypersensitive. You know, there are groups where someone will get triggered if I say this is what I do. I'm not promoting anything. It's just like I do this, and here's my free advice.
Yeah.
You know, like I do this for a living. I've done this with SCORE as a volunteer organization, like, and here's my free advice. There are groups where people would get triggered by that. And there are groups where people are like, oh, thank you for giving us this for free. Right. And it's like, all right, clearly I'm going to spend a lot more time on the second group than like, you know, the first one. And so like, there's the 80-20 rule, like find the groups that are working for you. There's probably some productivity hacks, and just spreadsheets are great. So like if you have 1 million groups that you're posting to, like post the name of the group, how big it is, or whatever other notes you want about the group and the subjects or whatever, what's popular in there, like examples of popular posts. And then also link to their rules and just like scan the rules before you post. And then, you know, just that's annoying, but like, you know, if it's hard to keep track of, it's like I probably would go the spreadsheet route. And then when I'm scheduling my time to interact with other people, just check it every time.
Yeah, I suppose.
And then the other way is just like make sure your bio's dialed in, and then write the type of content that doesn't explicitly comment, like doesn't explicitly say, hey, I'm writing a book.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I figure I'll be doing that a lot more in the future. Like right now I'm in full swing promo mode because I've got a month. But yeah, in the future, I think once the book is out, I'll be like, hey, you know, let's talk about something totally unrelated to my book. And by the way, if you ever check out my bio, it's got the landing page is right there.
Yep. Yeah. And so there you go, specifically. And I would start out with places that are friendly for that. Like the cross promotion you talk about, you've already cross promoted other people's work. You know, like there's no worry about, like, that's a low hanging fruit. Go for that first, of course. But if you want to ramp up other, you know, getting other people in, you know, that geek out about something other people get excited about and have the link in your bio is always like a good way to go. That's pretty, like, you should, you know, as long as what you're geeking out about doesn't, you know, isn't, I don't know, rated X or, you know, totally crazy, you know, like,
yeah.
Right?
No, it's not hard for me to geek out about like books and things like that. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I think the only other thing that I heard an example of, this is something to consider as you're kind of creating this attract, engage, sell framework. Let me just throw out a few examples of what this has looked like from people I've talked to. And so there was one person I hope to get an interview with from ArmadilloCon who did a very successful Facebook launch, because we found a lot of Facebook fan, or a lot of cyberpunk fans are on Facebook. I think it's a generational thing, probably. And so there were a lot of fan groups of cyberpunk stuff. So he just created his own one, and then posted content to it weekly or something. He said, like, you know, when a movie came out or whatnot, you know, that's pretty low maintenance, but that's how he eventually built his newsletter, got got
I
beta readers, etc.
Yeah, no, those are like, yeah, I've been kicking around the idea of starting a series review channel.
Yep.
for that reason. But yes,
Yep.
that is a time sink, that kind of stuff. So man, you've got to have some time.
Well, a series review, right? But if it's like a short article, like news article bullet points, right? Or the way he described it was like fairly like once a week, relatively short content.
Yeah, I mean, I've read at least 200 series. I can, that's enough to start with.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so like maybe you could do a full review channel, but like for instance, you could just create a Reddit and do very short posts. Hey, saw this. This is what I thought was cool about it. This is, what I wish had happened.
Yeah, I mean, my problem
Whatever.
with that, like, I agree that that's a good idea, and maybe down the road I'll do that.
Sure.
But the problem is then you're promoting the channel or the subreddit instead of your book, and so yeah, you're splitting your attention.
Yeah. It is. It's kind of like, I think if you do it right and you do it in a low hanging once a week sort of way, it's kind of like what you're doing with the serial in the sense of like, you don't have to promote it. You leave it there and you're doing it where someone will search for it. So like you can't do this in Discord again because it's not searchable, right? But on Reddit or other platforms, that you could put some content and like keep it basically like a tweet a week or something like that, right? Like time box it again to what's manageable and build it over time. But it's a long-term content, unlike going into groups, like other groups, to start conversations. Like the most direct ways are the cross promotion with people who already know who you are. It's a no-brainer. And then going to the moderator, looking at what kind of content does well in their group, and then asking if you can create some kind of high quality post or a segment. Like those are going to be the ones where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And then, the organic strategy is just starting up these conversations. That works a lot better, I feel like, with people who have a big back catalog. Because it is a little bit less, indirect. And then this one, and that's probably very time consuming, like keeping up with a group enough to keep up with the comments, right? You're making multiple comments. I feel like this last strategy of the short weekly post, like news post, is like, it's not going to give you a huge payoff right now. But over the long term, if you acquire a lot of customer base or user base, then it does give you a lot of advantage eventually. But like the other advantage is, even though it's slow, it's not as time consuming as having to engage in ad hoc conversations, like checking groups every, like I have a hard time staying in touch with groups and like conversations, right? Like that is like you're checking in multiple times a week. You see people respond to you and then you got to respond back, right? So I think that is more time intensive than this other one. Although probably like immediate conversations you're having with people would probably drive a little more immediate traffic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly, in the future, I probably will end up doing this. Like, I know a well-known sci-fi author who, he did a YouTube book review channel, TikTok reviews, and man, he built a huge audience for himself that way. And I mean, I don't know, maybe that's how he got his Big 5 deal. I have no idea. Yeah. But yeah, it's impressive to see that. It's just that, wow. I mean, how does he have that much time? Like, I really would like to know how he has that much time.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the principle of time boxing, right? Like we underestimate the power of doing like something small as consistently as once a week. But doing that for a year is actually like, doing a tweet a week for a year, essentially. But
sometimes
for
it
news
doesn't pay off. Like I have,
right.
I started tweeting a lot more. I think in last year.
Twitter doesn't. No. Twitter doesn't know, but like I'm saying, like a tweet's worth of content. I don't know. Maybe he did a longer, more intense review each week. But like if I would say like for like a Reddit thing or a Facebook group, again, other people can post. That's the advantage, right? With Twitter, it's only your own feed, and then it's like gone in a second. Like nobody's seeing that. So,
Yeah,
I
I started my own
recommend that.
Facebook group as well, and it didn't really, it kind of fizzled.
No?
Yeah, I've done it twice. But yeah, I was not really seeing seeing much from that.
Sure.
I mean,
What kind
maybe
of content were you posting?
well, those were actually both writer groups. So maybe if I
Okay.
did a more reader oriented group, and I am
Yeah.
considering that as well. But I've seen other people do the same thing, and it ends up being an echo chamber of them and their writer friends, and a few of their fans, and that's it. It just never grows from there.
Yeah. I think that's one thing where it's like if you're interested in this, there's probably a whole other specific segment. I'm just sharing that example because like that did work for someone, and he kind of reverse engineered it, right? He looked at fan groups.
I know who you're talking about.
Cyberpunk.
He's good at that. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I hope to record that interview so I can capture that. So at some point I've reached out to him. I think he's open to it. We don't have a set of time. And so I don't want to like name drop him until like we actually have the interview. But anyway, it's just like that has worked for some people. I'm just going to throw out a few examples again, because it's just interesting to see what has worked for people. There's another writer on a Armadillo Con panel that said actually their social network for attracting people was Quora. They're a hard science fiction writer. They wrote science articles on Quora, and this is someone you were on a panel with, but they wrote like answers on Quora. And again, they're not promoting their work, but in their bio, they have a link to a website, newsletter, or whatever. So people got introduced, and he built his newsletter that way, right? And so
that's
it's like
pretty awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Right. And that's a really good example of the conversation, just regular conversation, geeking out plus bio. And I think the tricky thing about that is there are limited time returns. Like you can't ramp that up in 1 week.
Right.
I think,
right.
And neither of these examples, you can't ramp them up in a week. And so I think that the underlying thing is like find something you can consistently do and stick with it. Because this is probably going to be a long term. There are all sorts of like Amazon hacks you can do to try and like rank higher in Amazon, for a little bit. But ultimately, like I'm not even going into those because I feel like that's kind of a very short-lived bump. And the people who get successful are the people who have some kind of long consistency, long consistent measure of attracting people. I think a third example, this is nonfiction, but there was a person who became a bestseller like a year or two after his book came out because he went on 300 podcasts. That was his acquisition channel. And he's like, actually, I went on daytime or like on a TV talk show interview, like national TV, and that didn't get me anything. But like podcasts were awesome because they were niche, and I could target up and coming podcasts so that and be one of their early episodes, so that as they grew, more and more people heard what I had to say. It was interesting to hear how he targeted it. But
that's awesome. Yeah. That's a method on Railroad as well. Yeah, find the authors that are fast growing that don't have a big audience yet, and cross promote with them. Yes.
Yep. There you go. Great. And so like maybe that is like the number one thing for you is just like agree to cross promote with people who are quick growing. Again, like, you'll learn as you do that to find like what's the right audience number, how often are they posting, how big is their audience grown, etc., to like find that type of profile, and you'll get good at finding it real quick.
Oh yeah, I can tell you. I mean, I look at their book description. If it's got typos, that's a no-go. I know that they're most likely not taking it seriously enough.
Right.
I look at their stats. Yeah, like how many followers they have. If it's like 12, probably not a thing. If they've been posting for a while, but if they've been posting for like a month and they've got 500 or 1,000 followers, that's somebody to look at.
Awesome.
Anyway, there's certain things that you just look for. Yeah.
So I guess I would say like if that really works for you, then form a lot of those partnerships, right? And just do that consistently. Get some kind of consistent, like every week, reach out to X people, and then grow that. I think there's probably like some other attraction mechanism, like Reddit or something searchable that you might want to find eventually. But probably really for you, this book's coming out in a month. Majority is doing that cross promotion because you already got that up and ready to go, and then like bring your newsletter back to life. So that's
that newsletter, man.
That's good. I recommend a content plan because like planning out content in advance can be really helpful. And I may be able to organize this up into a PDF, but I'll share this with you later, or what I have at some point. But what I like to do for content plans, because like creating content in a newsletter, whatnot, you said like it does take a long time to promote. Part of the longest time is figuring out what to write. And so what I'll do when I'm trying to start an organic promotion campaign of any kind is I'll have a list of topics, and then I'll have a list of post types or like content types. And this is stuff like, top 10 tips, an analysis of someone in the field, kind of the hot take is like a minority opinion that I have that I feel strongly about. The personal story from my life, like, I have all of these different genres of content. And then you can almost like, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
You could go random encounter table on this, right? And like roll a die, or like pick a topic that you like and roll a die and like see what kind of like content comes out of that. And that's really powerful in the sense of like, if you have to do posts in other areas, for newsletters, for other social media, then you can generate actually a lot of different types of posts. Like you could write several different types of posts on the same topic that are still all valuable by kind of like having a plot of like, these are the topics that I think people get excited about and I can talk about. And like, these are the different ways I could talk about it. So
yeah. I mean, I honestly, I do have a roster of that. It's just that's time that ends up being time consuming because I like to be thoughtful when I write stuff. And anyway, I mean, no, box. Seriously, but you're absolutely right. Like that's high on my list of things to do soon.
Sure. I mean, just if you're already doing that content, right? Then, and I think you probably should do at least some level of it just to keep your newsletter alive. Again, so that you can maintain an audience over time. This is kind of the longevity play. And then, that's good. We are at the hour. Sorry, I only scheduled this for an hour. Are there any other questions or things we haven't talked about?
I don't think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, plug your book one last time.
Yes. Majority coming out on. Oh, it has an audiobook as well, which is going to be awesome. I've heard some samples.
Nice.
Yes. So. All
right. So check out Majority. Where can people find you?
AbbyGoldsmith.com, ABBYGOLDSMITH.
Awesome. So, all right. Well, thank you for your time and good luck on your Majority launch.
Thank you.
All right. So how did it turn out? Well, on the bright side, Abby actually got a lot of positive reviews. So she was on a Wired magazine podcast and got a starred Kirkus review. So she was able to do that, I think, as she articulated it, being able to leverage the fact that she did have a large following on Royal Road that helped her get some attention from these bigger platforms. However, that did not translate into the number of ratings that she got. She wanted to have more. She was comparing herself against other Royal Road authors and didn't have as many as she likes. Doesn't know her sales numbers yet, and I'm not going to release her sales number publicly, but it doesn't know yet the comparison of whether it's a lot of people buying but not reviewing, or not a lot of people moving from these interview channels into buying. So kind of figuring out where that disruption has happened still needs to kind of take place. However, this is what she had to say about the different marketing techniques. One, I don't think she viewed this as a marketing technique, but as the major thing working for her is her Royal Road following. She said, used that again to get some major, interviews and reviews. That was incredibly helpful. And that kind of tracks with people who have gotten some traction with their books. That allows them, or they frequently get that traction by consistently contributing to some platform for a year. Now, whether that's, Royal Road is the optimal platform, whether there's another platform she needs to keep up side by side, maybe an email list, who knows? I don't, there are things to experiment with that maybe Royal Road is not the optimal platform for her. Who knows? But that's contributing regularly to a platform for a year is generally the most successful part of everybody's marketing and what they look back on as like that moved the needle. Now, I think what was frustrating to Abby as she described it was that all the effort of book launch, a ton of interviews and going out there didn't seem to give her a big immediate bump. And we were dissecting back and forth because a lot of people swear by the book launch. I do wonder if that is a more effective tactic for people who already have a big platform, i.e., what a book launch does is it helps you make the most of your audience. But if you were trying to do a big book launch push and you're focusing on areas where you don't have a big audience, it's not going, they're usually not going to flock to you. You might get lucky, but that's the exception rather than the rule. And again, what works for indie authors is the consistent contributing to a platform. So there's some of that. However, there's some other complicating factors, she said, that might have diminished the effectiveness of her reviews. So one of those, she said, was that she felt there was mixed messaging between her blurb and her cover and her subtitle. Her blurb seemed YA, her cover looked a little hard sci-fi, and the subtitle was a progression fantasy, which is a little bit lighthearted. So that mixed messaging. And then she said underlying that, or another factor is even if she'd had those dialed in or in sync with each other, it's a hard sell because it's cross-genre. So I dive more deeply into this in another video where I talk about audience research. Like the key to knowing how to pitch your book is doing good audience research. Go check it out. But I don't think cross-genre in itself means it can't be sold. I think cross-genre means it's really hard for authors to figure out where start selling it. You can have multiple angles in your book and influences, but you can only pitch it one way. If you try to pitch something as, YA dystopian versus and hard sci-fi and progression fantasy all at once, you're just going to confuse all three audiences rather than bringing all three audiences in. So instead, I think. And this is true of businesses in terms of niching down their message. They're constantly need to do this. I think it's the same thing of books. Your book can be more complex, but you need to pick one central idea, something that pays off all the way through, and focus on that angle to the audience who is in love with that. So again, I have more examples in my audience research video. Go check that out. And then hopefully maybe we'll sit down with Abby and we'll brainstorm some of this together. So we'll give you another practical example, but this time with someone who's already published a book, right? Rather than planning a book. So we shall see how that goes. But anyway, that is one of the big hurdles. A couple other things that she mentioned, that she hired a business coach who lined up some of the interviews and wasn't super happy with the results. And would I say never get a business coach? I have learned a lot from getting consultants and coaches and other things. I find that, like pretty much any human service, there's a big degree of variation, and even sometimes people who are very effective are not very effective for you. And so if you're going to go for a business coach, kind of expect to try out a few of them before you find one you like. And that can get expensive. So like factor that into your budgeting if you want to go the business coach route. Anyway, the biggest takeaway as always should be that lesson 1, pick a platform that you can regularly contribute to and plan on developing that for a year, at least weekly, I imagine, with like a meaty post, or maybe more often with smaller posts. It depends on that. Of course, like how you interact with it will depend greatly on the platform, right? Like, and how you like to communicate. If you like little like hot takes and little bites and whatnot, Twitter can be your thing. I've actually talked to artists who found that Twitter was their most successful tool for finding new audiences, which is interesting. It depends on your personal style. Answering questions, you might be on Reddit or Quora or something like that. I know one science fiction author who built up an email list by answering science questions on Quora and then just having a link to his email list for his sci-fi books in his bio. And eventually, over time, enough people found him that way. He was kind of getting in while Quora was exploding. So again, some of these things work differently. Now might be harder to stand out. You might have to do more work rather than falling into it accidentally. You might have to do more research about how to stand out in Quora. But anyway, that's just an example. If you have a somewhat older community, Facebook. So one author I talked to who was in cyberpunk, which, a genre that really took off or, was really big in the 80s. And so it's a little bit older people, I imagine, older demographic that like cyberpunk, or at least, not Zoomers or whatever. So, that might be Facebook. Younger audience, Instagram, TikTok. If you're a visual thinker, again, Instagram, TikTok. If you like conversations, you might be thinking in terms of a podcast or YouTube or streaming on Twitch or whatever your style is. You stream on Twitch as you play games and talk through your novels or whatever. And so really you just pick what you think you can do. Again, if you game regularly and you're like, I might as well talk to people about my novel while I game, and people do that on Twitch, or talk about politics or whatever while they game on Twitch, right? If that's the most sustainable thing for you, do it. Great. Again, or it's Twitter or answering questions on discussions on Reddit, blah blah blah, etc. So pick the platform that most works for you and run with it and be consistent. One of the interesting things as I was talking to Abby and kind of promoting this consistency over time approach, she says, but growth isn't consistent. And that's absolutely true, right? She was saying that her growth doubled once she was featured on the homepage of Royal Road. And yeah, that's absolutely true, but it's also true that the people who tend to get featured, right, who get those huge bumps that leap forward are the people who have been consistently contributing over time. Relatively few people get hot right away. And even when they do, it's usually some in an area where they've tried it several times. So I was just listening to a YouTuber the other day, for example, not author, but a content creator who was talking about how she had 4 or 5 major channels and then kind of restarted with a new channel or a new take on it. And then that blew up within a few months. And then how that actually made her anxious because the sudden success made her worry that, easy come, easy go. Maybe all of these people will suddenly stop watching as suddenly as they came, which is a terrifying thought, and, spiraled into depression. So it's like, even if you get that sudden success, you may not want it. However, either way, the people who tend to break through, whether slow and steady, or I think more often in these just sudden surprising fits and starts, are the people who are consistently posting stuff. If you're not posting stuff, you can't have it boosted by the algorithm or picked up by the algorithm. There's some, science and some optimization where you can try and do things to boost the likelihood that your content will be recommended or picked up or whatever. And you should engage in that and make that part of your process. But again, the backbone is you can't optimize things if you're not posting consistently. You really can't optimize inconsistency. So come back down to that as the biggest takeaway. And then I think another big takeaway is just learning to pitch your book, who to pitch it to, and the words to say is hard. It's not something you generally want to be doing after you've written your book. You want to be thinking that before, during, and while editing, and while writing for promotion. You want to think about that, lock that down more, do that audience research. Again, check out the other videos, because one of the things you'll run into is a difficulty. A novel is so many things. It's hard to summarize. And so if you don't already know what to focus on when talking to other people about your novel, then it's just going to be really hard to discover by trial and error all of the things that are in your novel. There's a way you can kind of reverse engineer what people like and look for in books. And if that resonates with what you have written or with what you're going to write, man, steal that language. Steal the language of fans so that when you're talking to them, they recognize you as a kindred spirit. And again, more specifics in that video, but that's another big takeaway. There are some experiments that I'm a little bit curious about in terms of things I hope to try or wish someone would try. I'd love to hear about if you are trying this, or if you are trying this, I'd be happy to help you. Throw a comment down below. But one of the things I don't hear a lot about from sci-fi or fantasy writers is Substack. I know a couple people kind of writing here and there, and they like the feedback that they get, but they have a small audience, maybe not super big. But for the most part, for instance, when I went to a sci-fi fantasy convention, writers convention over the summer, I didn't hear anyone talking about Substack, and a lot of them smack talking X/Twitter. So, but I'd be curious in particular about Substack as a way to maybe write portions of your book, or like tease the beginnings and stop, and then and then post on Amazon, and then kind of do some behind the scenes while you're finishing your novel, etc., or like on to other projects, I don't know, or just post short stories as a writing exercise, that you kind of use it as a writing exercise space, but not necessarily all the stuff you're going to publish, and maybe tease just a chapter or two of a novel and when you publish it. Anyway, it seems like there would be ways that you could use that platform, and it's designed for writers, if not specifically sci-fi fantasy writers. So kind of curious about Substack. The other thing I wonder, or experiment I kind of want to run, and this will take some months to validate with Abby or with other people, is if the podcasting thing doesn't work for getting a huge bump immediately, but has kind of a long tail effect. So this is not in fiction, this is nonfiction, but Hal Elrod writing The Miracle Morning made that a bestseller a year after he published it. So that means he went through the usual boost, which is not as high as he wanted to, and then it fell down, and it took him a year to get back to the place where it was selling like it did the first month, but then it had momentum. And the way he did this, his big secret, was that I think he did like 300 podcasts in 1 year or something crazy. So like a podcast almost every day at least, and I imagine several days. He said he actually went on national TV, and that wasn't nearly as helpful as podcasts, because people listen to podcasts at their computers, so they're much more likely to be able to like just click a new tab and go over to Amazon and buy stuff. So, but the other thing that was interesting about his podcast strategies, he specifically targeted highly rated young podcasts, so that as they grew, he would be in one of their first episodes. So as more people discovered the podcast, he'd be, one of the people that they would hear before, eventually there's, podcasts where I've listened to 50 or 60 episodes, but it goes on for multiple years. And maybe I run out of steam on episode, 60. But if you're episode number 5, I'm definitely going to have heard what you had to say, right? So, that was an interesting strategy that paid off for him. But again, it's probably less like he went and did those podcast interviews, and that day tons of people signed up, like maybe a couple people trickled in, who listened to the podcast right away. But then as more and more and more people came to the podcast, and then you multiply that by 300 podcasts, all of a sudden he's getting a regular boost that's big enough to start hitting the algorithms, and then, finally start turning the wheels, right? Where it gets recommended more as more and more people from these various sources come and buy it, and as more people buy it, the website gets its understands more about their behavior and who they're like, and as it gets more data, it's able to recommend your book to more and more people, etc. So as more and more people buy it, it ranks higher in search. And so this is something that kind of generates that momentum. And again, probably it felt like, big bump first month, if you get that, a huge drop off, and just nothing, kind of building to this big crescendo again. And so I think a lot of times, again, that's growth. And again, actually, you see in this Hal Elrod case, one platform, podcast, consistently for a year, like daily for a year, and got to bestseller. Now, of course, you have to have the quality behind this. I'm not really focused 100%, or actually very much right now, especially on the quality of the writing. My goal here, my mission here, is to help indie creators support themselves with their work, especially authors right now I'm focusing on. So, but it should go without saying that, like, part of the reason that became a bestseller is that it lived up to its promise. So when he was promising people this miracle morning that would change their morning and have this impact, and sharing stories about how this process changed his life and other people's lives, right? The book actually had to deliver that to people so that they gave it a good rating rather than a bad rating, right? Because getting all of these people giving your book a bad rating will then have like a downward spiral. So the quality has to be there. I'm assuming the quality is there, but everything being equal, right? Your marketing strategy is building up an audience over a year. And there's other, tips and tricks. Like, you should figure out a way to get these people before or after they buy your book onto an email list so that you can market them directly. If you market yourself on 300 podcasts, right, and you don't collect any email addresses, then the next time you launch a book, you have to go on 300 podcasts again to tell people about it. But if you've collected the email addresses of the people who bought the first time, because you have like bonus content, let's say that's really popular, like sign up, get some bonus content, etc., then all of a sudden you have an email list of people who bought your stuff, who not only bought your stuff, they're engaged enough to sign up, to the email list to get whatever bonus material. This works really well in the nonfiction space, but figuring out how to do it in the fiction space a little trickier. I've heard people say they kind of released a little backstory or a novella or short story or something like that you could only get if you signed up the author's email list. That was kind of teased in the novel. But anyway, regardless of however you do that, then all of a sudden when you have your next book, you have some people who've already bought and are highly engaged, so they're likely big fans who are going to buy again. And you might get most of the benefit of going on that 300 podcasts just by emailing your email list a few times. See how that works? And the next time you don't have to do maybe 300 podcasts. So that's just another example. I haven't talked a ton about that in terms of curating an email list, but I do hear that again and again from interviews of authors who have traction, who are more established, and hitting the stride where they're regularly selling their books, that the email list is a huge help so that you don't have to start from scratch every time you're marketing a book. I'll see you next time in the Ubiquitous Tavern.